That what would happen if the last pope already had been elected, and the whole world hadn't noticed. In a corner solemn from the Vatican, amidst echoes of centuries of faith and mystery, a name resonates with unexpected force. Leo XIV. It is not just a papal election, it is a sign. A word that for those attentive to the ancient manuscripts sets off a spiritual alarm. Leo, a title that was not pronounced in more than 1 century. An echo that crawls from the deeper than the history to the present. But this is not just about one name. It's about an old one prophecy that for generations has been whispered with fear and reverence. The prophecy of Saint Malachy. A cryptic list that seems to have early with precision the papacies since the 16th century, until now. And according to that prophecy, there was only one left, Peter the Roman, the shepherd who would lead the church during a great tribulation until his fall. So the question burns like incense. In the altar of the doubt, is Leo XIV that last shepherd? This video is not intended to provide definitive answers, but rather to open a door toward it unknown, towards the symbolic, towards the spiritual. Because when the history and the prophecy are intertwined, visible begins to shake, and maybe, just maybe, we are living the last chapters of an era. Get ready to discover what many prefer to ignore, because once you hear what you are about to hear, you will no longer be able to ignore it. It wasn't an accident. It was not a simple choice between neutral options. The name Leon, chosen by the new pontiff, carries with him centuries of symbolic, theological, and prophetic weight. In the tradition Christian, the lion is an ambivalent image. It represents Christ, the Lion of Judah, but also the adversary who prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour, according to warns the first letter of Peter. So, why recover a name dormant for more than 120 years? From the 19th century, no pope dared to use the title Leo. The last was Leo XIII, a deeply spiritual man who had apocalyptic visions about the future of the church. Coincidence? Or veiled warning? When Robert Francis Prevost chose to call oneself Leo XIV, many eyes opened with bewilderment. Some they saw it as a tribute, others like a omen. In the ecclesiastical history, the names are not mere titles, they are statements. John Paul, Benedict, Francis. Every election it contains a vision, a mission, a spiritual identity. So what does it tell us? He named Leo XIV on this new pontificate. For some theologians, the lion symbolizes leadership in times of chaos, a guardian in the storm. For others, it is a warning, the roar before the end. And this is where the prophecy begins to burn. According to Saint Malachy, the last pope would be a shepherd in amidst persecutions, and a name like Leon, with his eschatological power, could be the encrypted key of that prophesied time. It is not about superstition, but about repeating patterns, about symbols that awaken ancient stories. Maybe this isn't just a new chapter. Maybe it's the last, and the name is the bell that announces the start of the end. In 1595, a mysterious manuscript was published in Rome. It contained a list of 112 Latin mottos, each associated with a future pope. The authorship was attributed to Saint Malachy, an Archbishop Irish of the 12th century, which, according to the tradition, there would be had a vision during a visit to Rome, a sequence of popes who would lead the church until its end. For centuries, this prophecy was seen with skepticism. Some they said it was a fake, an assembly to influence elections papal, but others could not ignore the strange coincidences. The motto, De labore solis, of labor of the sun, for example, was assigned to John Paul II, born during a solar eclipse and died in another. And so, slogan after slogan, the parallels began to unsettle even the most rational. Today, after the death of Benedict XVI and the resignation of Francis, they believe that we have arrived at the last name on the list. In persecution extreme, sedebit Petrus Romanus. In middle of the final persecution, Peter the Roman will sit, who will feed his sheep in many tribulations, after it which the city of the 7 hills will be destroyed, and the judge fearsome will judge his town. Is it possible that this is the described time, the defenders of the prophecy? They point out that the name Peter doesn't have to be literal. He's a figure, a firm shepherd, reminiscent of the first pope, and the last name Romanus. It could refer not to a place of birth, but to a spiritual identity linked to Rome, the eternal seat. This is where Leo XIV comes in. Scene: American by origin, but trained in the spirituality Augustinian, shaped by years of mission in Latin America and now sitting in the Roman chair. He embodies that duality, outsider and heir, modern and ancient, a Peter of the new millennium. Are we facing the fulfillment of the last sentence, or simply facing a powerful coincidence? The line between prophecy and conspiracy has never been thinner. But what is certain is that the spiritual clock continues moving forward. The history of the Catholic Church has been for centuries closely linked to Europe. But the signs of the time indicate an unexpected twist. The new pope was not born in Italy, nor in Spain, nor in Poland. Born in Chicago, the heart of the United States, an American pope, a historical anomaly or a prophetic sign. In an era where the geographical borders lose meaning and the world connects through invisible networks, spiritual power also seems to migrate. Rome continues being the physical center of the Vatican, but the soul of the modern empire vibrates in other coordinates, and that is where Leo XIV emerges. Some analysts say so come as the symbol of a new spiritual balance. If the ancient Roman Empire was the stage of the first Christians, today the economic, military and cultural empire is Western and digital. Could it be that the new Rome is closer to Silicon Valley than to Colosseum? The election of an American pope isn't just a curious fact, it's a narrative shift. It's a change in the spiritual compass of the world, because it's not just about geography, but about influence, language, mentality. And in that sense, Leo XIV represents a church that seeks to survive and lead in half of the new global order. Even the skeptics recognize the symbolism. A shepherd comes of the empire contemporary, in a world in moral and existential crisis. A new Peter, not with sandals and a cane, but with the burden of humanity hyper-connected and fragmented. In that context, the words of the prophecy acquire another tone. Maybe Peter the Roman doesn't have to come from Rome. Maybe he has to come of the power that now governs the world. And that power, whether you like it or not, is spoken of in English. Behind the name Leo XIV hides a man almost a stranger outside of church circles. Nothing in his biography screams power, ambition, or greatness. On the contrary, its history is marked by silence, humility, and the job missionary. But precisely for that reason, his profile begins to fit with disturbing precision in the mold of the prophesied last shepherd. Robert Francis Prevost was born in 1955 in Chicago, but his vocation he took away from his homeland. He entered the Order of St. Augustine and was sent to Peru, where he served for more than a decade as a missionary. He did not seek fame. He did not ask for titles. He only walked among the poor, sharing his faith in silence. There, in the Andean mountain range, learned he language of the town. He lived the faith from below. He knew he real pain and the hope that is born among ruins. And it was precisely that spirit, the one who led to his being appointed Prior General of his order. Years later, Francisco called to Rome for a delicate task, to lead the dicastery for the bishops, that is, to mold the future of the Catholic hierarchy. But even in the hallways of the Vatican power, Prevost avoided the spotlights. He was known for his prudence, your listens patiently, silent discernment. He never sought to be a protagonist, and yet fate or providence allowed him pushed to the center of the scenery. Isn't that it? The type of figure that prophecy of Saint Malachy he was implying, not a conqueror, but a shepherd, not a prince, but a servant, a new Peter, without name, but with mission. Leo XIV, the man invisible that ascended without noise. It could be just the voice that feeds the flock in middle of the tribulation. And his past missionary, his low profile and his spiritual firmness are not coincidences, they are signs. The names, they keep echoes. In the history of the Church, the papal name has never been an innocent gesture. It's a sign, a statement of principles. And when Robert Prevost chose to call oneself Leo XIV, he awakened a dormant resonance that goes beyond the history. Played he heart of the Catholic eschatology. The last pope in carry that name was Leo XIII, a deeply spiritual man who, according to testimonies, he had prophetic visions about the final struggle between the good and evil. It was he who composed the prayer to St. Michael the Archangel, asking protection against the ambushes of the demon, after what he described as a vision of the future of the Church, besieged, wounded, resisting in darkness. Since then, the name Lion fell in a mysterious silence. None of his successors dared to take it up again, until now. Because do it at this point in the history. What does it mean to awaken that symbol just when the faith seems more besieged than ever? Some come in this election an invisible line that unites the past with the present, as if Leo XIV was not just a continuation, but a revival of the Leothenes' wake-up call, an echo that is amplified in a context whether the Church is facing an unprecedented cultural, ideological, and spiritual storm. And here, the prophecy he murmurs again, could this return be a sign of the final cycle? Eschatology. Christian does not predict dates, but does patterns, signs, and one of them is the reappearance of names with prophetic weight in times of crisis. Leo XIV not only resurrects a forgotten title, perhaps it embodies the roar that announces the beginning of the Great Tribulation. Or perhaps the silent guardian who will face the darkness with the courage of the Lion of Judah. Just open the eyes, look beyond the walls of the Vatican. The Church does not cross a common moment. She is being besieged, not with swords or fire, but with something much more subtle and devastating: indifference, scandal, division, mistrust. The scandal sexual that shook dioceses whole, the silent flight of the faithful, the rise of ideologies that reduce the faith to superstition. All of this makes up a landscape of spiritual ruin. For many, the Church looks like a medieval castle surrounded by forces, invisible ones, that seek to tear down its foundations. And while the world demands a modern reformed church without dogmas or roots, within it also grow discordant voices. Bishops against bishops, cardinals clashing, faithful confused. It's as if his body was divided, just when he needed it most unit. In this context, the words of the prophecy of St. Malachi resonate with disturbing clarity. In persecution, extreme. In the Peter, the Roman will be subjected to extreme persecution. Not a military persecution, but an ideological one, cultural. A persecution that doesn't kill the body, but annihilates the soul. Don't we already see the signs? In many parts of the world, being a Christian means losing rights, being silenced, censored, and ostracized. Moral relativism has replaced the gospel, and the new generations, raised in the virtuality, no longer find meaning in the tradition, neither in the sacred. It is in this panorama of darkness that Leo XIV emerges, not as a charismatic savior, but as a discreet shepherd who knows the language of the times. A man who has walked among the poor, who has heard more than you have spoken, and that now carries a church on his shoulders fractured. And it is here where the prophecy becomes possibility, because perhaps the last pope will not be the one who witnesses the fall, but the one who sustains the little that remains until it arrives the final moment. A besieged church needs a guardian, a shepherd willing to feed the herd in half of the siege. And everything indicates that that moment is already started. It does not carry his name Pedro. He was not born in Rome. But if the prophecy of St. Malachy is encoded in symbols, not in data literal, what does it matter? Name. The figure of Peter the Roman does not need to be an exact replica of the apostle, but an echo, a reflection of his mission. The first of the popes, called to be a rock in half from chaos, fisherman in amidst storms, witness in through betrayals. And isn't that what we see in Leo XIII? A silent man, without pretensions of power, which returns to the essential, to the care of the soul, to the simplicity of the gospel, to the obedience without spectacle. Like Peter, he walks in fear and trembling. Like Peter, he holds on to a faith that seems to waver. And like Peter, he may be called to die for it. Some they look your profile and come weakness, others come strategy. But the eyes spiritual perceive another thing, fidelity, not to prestige, but to the flock, not to the world, but to the eternal shepherd. In the midst of the global storm, perhaps Peter the Roman is not a title, but a function, a prophetic role reserved for someone who, in the darkest hour, feed the sheep with whatever little remains. And if that's true, then we're not waiting for it to arrive anymore. It's already here, and it's wearing white. Maybe the most common mistake when interpreting a prophecy is to take it literally. Not every ending involves physical destruction. Sometimes deeper collapses are invisibles, the faith that fades, the truth that is diluted, the hope that wears out in the silence. And if the St. Malachy's prophecy truly points to the last pope, perhaps referring to the end of a spiritual cycle, to the last shepherd of an era, Leo XIV might not be the last to occupy Peter's throne, but he could be the last to hold his essence, the last to preserve the calls when everything others become in ashes, and that it converts in a prophetic figure, not for what it says, but for what it represents. The church will not fall with crash. It will fall with indifference, not with violence, but with forgetfulness. And the true Peter the Roman will be the one who, even seeing the temple crumble stone by stone, do not abandon the altar. Are we ready for that? Maybe the real question is not whether Leo XIV is the last pope, but if we pay attention to the signs, to the symbols, to the warnings that are repeated over and over again, waiting to be understood by those who still have eyes to see. Now the judgment is not just for Rome, it is for us. And you, what? You think? Leave us your opinion in the comments. Share this video with who needs to wake up. And if this message touched something inside you, subscribe, because the history, it's not over yet, but we may be in its final chapter.